Welcome to the 3 Life Lessons podcast, where I, Rob Hubbard, talk to renowned figures from learning and development to uncover the secrets to their success and find out what makes them tick. Remember to like, subscribe and follow to ensure that you never miss an episode. So I'm so thrilled to have here today, I think it's fair to say, Laura, one of the most well-known people in our industry, I would say globally. And I'm not just saying that. You see, this is what I love about you. You get this kind of response. I'm not just saying that. So this was the memory that I wanted to share. Do you remember Online Educa Berlin a few years ago? We were stood having drinks. I think it was the end of the first night, something like that. And it was just you and I chatting. And there were 2 young ladies who were walking around the room with drinks, and they were seeing who they could spot. And as they sort of swept past us, one of them went, oh my God, it's Laura Overton, oh my God. And you looked at me and you raised one eyebrow and we had a bit of a giggle about it. And it's a funny thing. But what I think is it's a lovely thing as well, because, you know, they knew who you were and they were clearly inspired by you, and they clearly felt, they felt lucky to be in the room with you. And you can sort of downplay it all you want, but the fact that you're inspiring, particularly young people, as they were, I think is great. And also, I think it's great that you've done that not through fanfare, jazz hands, all of this kind of loud stuff. You've done it by just being true to yourself and doing the right thing in the right way and sticking to your guns for as long as I've known you. So yeah, huge respect. Really delighted to have you here, Laura Overton.
Oh, wow. I'm not quite sure what to do with that introduction, but thank you.
Well,
thank you.
It's entirely warranted. So first of all, can you tell us, please, what are you doing now, and tell us about your career path to get there?
Okay, well, I think most people would know me for my research work. And I've been thinking about that recently, because actually, who am I? And I think I am literally a re-searcher. I've been searching for an answer to how learning and development can drive more value through almost every element of my career in this amazing industry that we're in. And I keep coming back to it time and time again through different angles, through different lenses. So, yeah, I'd say that it's what I do, is I'm just hungry to find out how we can be our very best selves as an industry. And my work involves research, but it also involves facilitation and conversation. I do work with webinars and I do sounding board work as well about what's going on, because I guess having been in the industry, having been up to my neck in data for the last 20 years around what our industry is doing, it just makes me incredibly curious and incredibly aware that I know less now than I did then. And so I'm more hungry to find out the answers, which means having conversations like this one is so important to me, I think, at this stage of my career. How did I get here? I'm one of these rare people, Rob, who I was at university. I studied maths and psychology. Terribly bad at maths, okay at psychology, but I got the hook for learning, or training as it was, and I just wanted to be in a training department. And that's how my first job was in a training department. Couldn't train on anything because I knew nothing. But I managed to wrangle my way into a training department. And that's where it was in the mid-80s. I was introduced to technology, and as it was at the time. And I was like, oh my God, this makes sense. Why aren't more people using it? And I got really hooked on the fact that technology potentially had an incredible opportunity to release potential in people and democratize learning. I wouldn't have used those words then, but something hooked me. And so I was involved for the first 15 years of my career working with organizations, really looking at how technology can drive change and learning. But I think people know me more for the last 20 years of my career. Don't do the sums, it's too many names, of actually dedicating my search into research. and setting up the Global Benchmark Service, which is now run brilliantly by Gent Armitage and Anna Barnett at My Tools for Business. So the fact that that's still going is great. And I'm involved the last 5 years with the CIPD's Learning at Work research as well. So, but it's not just about the data, it's about the conversation, it's about exploring, and it's about surfacing potentially how we can drive more value. So I'm a very biased researcher. I am just hungry to find out how learning and development can drive a better value back into the business. So I will declare my bias now. But that's really my story, and how I made those different changes in my life was really down to luck. And a bit of hard work. And spotting an opportunity. So I think they are the sorts of things. I didn't plan to be where I am today, Rob. And and I'm right now. I'm still studying. I'm still curious, and so I'm in the middle of a doctoral program, looking at this whole process of how we can really continue to drive that same question. Same research question, but looking at it through different lenses, different angles, just to see if I can spot something different, something we've been missing for the last 35 years. So, I'm curious.
I mean, you mentioned earlier in that you said that you feel that you know less now than you did before. Is that because now the field is so much wider, and there are so many more questions, or is it that there's depth? Why do you feel that way?
I think it's because I'm more aware. The deeper you go into a particular discipline, you can think of yourself as an expert, or you can be more and more aware that actually that having expertise in one particular discipline is very, very inadequate to deal with the complexity in the world today, and all of the entanglement that we face when we're trying to operate with people, with teams, with teams of people that represent our organisation. It's very, very messy, and having just one narrow focus on what we do in learning and development it just doesn't cut it anymore. And I've kind of known that all the way through. My data has shown that all the way through for the last 20 years. But I'm now more aware of what that means, and where I don't have all the answers. Yeah.
More aware of the gap. Fantastic. Well, let's get into it, Laura. Let's uncover some of your life lessons. So what's the first one that you'd like to share?
Well, I looked at different lessons that I've been learning through my life, and I guess the first one is about recognizing and owning our own agency in our ability to shape our future. I was hungry to get into learning and development, so I went for basically a graduate program that demanded that I became the secretary to the training manager, and I was like, he said, Laura, first thing you need to do is do your typing test. And I just said, well, I can't type. So basically I can't type, but if you give me the job, I will learn to type. And at the end of the interview, he said, now it's time for your typing test. And I said, I still can't type. But if you give me the job, and that stepping into the thing that you want to be, and just going for it, I think is really important. All through my early career, I was a girl in a man's world of learning technologies, and working in the supply industry in my early years of my career. And I constantly was looking for the job that I wanted to do, and working out how to do it in the role that I had today, and making a complete nuisance of myself. And I was headhunted into different roles, mainly to get me out of the way, I think. So I think there's this sense of owning your space and knowing what you're hungry about. I was hungry and curious about the issues we've just been talking about, and I just wanted to find out about it. And I think there is a sense of agency, because the number of times people were recruited over and above me, and I had to train them up in different roles, and at the same time doing their role and training them up, and they get paid the big bucks. And I'm like, you know what? I'm still going to go. and even to a point of declaring that I would need to leave unless I got my next opportunity. And a number of people saying, "Oh, where are you going?" You know, senior leaders in the
Yeah.
organisation. So that's what I mean about agency, about, you know, just seeing that what you want and going for it, doing
Yeah.
today's job to the best of your ability. And I think that determination has helped me move into spaces where clearly I was not qualified. You know, moving into the research space, I clearly wasn't qualified to do that initially. It was just out of pure curiosity and community that kind of drove me into that space. And it was, and I think, you know, seizing the moment, seizing the opportunity, trying it out. You know, when the government reduced our funding for the whole of the research project that we did in the early days, it was funded by government, working with industry, for industry, funded by government, and then it was just removed completely. And it was,
Right.
okay, how do we move forward? Who do we go to? And, you know, not giving up. And using what I had in my hands, the connections, the engagement, the reputation of the research, and doing something different with it, and setting up a not-for-profit organisation which then carried it forward for another 10 years. So that's what I mean about agency. It's about, you know, using the power that you do have and recognising that you can do things even though they're small things, and make a big difference with that.
So you sound like you've always been quite clear on your goals. Is that right? Knowing what you want to achieve and then being able to walk to, you know, strive towards those.
If only.
Uh-huh.
I think I've always been passionate about this one research question. It's about driving better value. And so seeking out the opportunities that were there for me at the time that would allow me to do that. And if I knew my purpose rather than perhaps my goal of how to get there. So
That's more than most people.
Well, I guess in hindsight, it's the one thing that was driving me all the time. You know, anyone who knew me 30 years ago, there are a few still around, you know, would say, actually, I've always been that same person, really passionate about, you know, the difference doing things differently can make. And trying to work out how do we do that in a smart way. So it's not that I had a goal to set up a company or to become an CEO, or to, I didn't have a goal for that. I just had a goal to say, okay, how do we do this better? And then I spotted the opportunities around me at the time to be able to lean into. And then only in hindsight you look back and you realise they were stepping stones.
Yeah, you can see the path.
Yeah.
And I know what you mean. I mean, so few people can identify what their purpose is. And it's a lot easier to set goals because they're nearer term things, aren't they? You can decide that you want that promotion or that role or develop these skills or whatever. But actually reflecting on and thinking about what your purpose is in this existence, and then using that as your North Star, you can see how that's guided you. Fantastic. Well, what's the second?
I was going to say I probably didn't articulate that to myself. But I think that was the thing I was always searching for within myself. So learning how to articulate that is something I learned later in life, I think.
Yeah, fantastic. So what's the second life lesson that you'd like to share, Laura?
For me, I think I call it life in the overlap.
Right.
For me, I came from a business background into learning and development because actually I was working in the supply side of the industry. And so my interest was originated in that space. But I am working in learning and development. So how does my business background and my passion for this amazing industry, kind of come together? And it's really inspired me. And I'd say that was probably about 20 years ago. I really started to say, actually, when you bring the two together, what is the new thing that comes out? So I've always called this idea, life in the overlap. There's nothing new in this world, but innovation comes when you combine new and different ideas together. So like 15, 18 years ago, I was doing a lot of work in the overlap between marketing and learning and development. Not how we could sell learning and development more, but what new insights can we bring to both sides of the equation if we only
Yeah.
combined our ideas. And that to me has been a really important element. I mean, when I was doing 15 years of the benchmark study research and looking at similar data sets every single year, there's had to be something new and fresh. So what's going on in the world that you could overlap with this data set to understand the data in a new and a fresh way? Look what's going on with technology, what's going on with business, what's going on with... I remember at one stage, it must have been 10 or 15 years ago, IBM was talking about customer activated strategies. And I just this principle overlapped with what I was seeing in learning and development with high-performing teams. This concept of customer activated strategy really kind of inspired me to think differently when I was looking at the data, to say, actually, what does this mean for our strategy and the way we position ourselves as learning and development professionals? But, my ideas don't come from myself. They come from and I can spot all kinds of things that give me inspiration.
Yeah.
To say, actually, when I overlap, I've recently written on LinkedIn about transformation being messy because I'm going through a renovation project at home. And actually it's brought to life why we struggle with transformation so much, and it's really brought new insight to me by overlapping one experience and one set of rules with another. So for me, it releases creativity. It releases a new way of thinking. It gives me a new lens to look at something that I'm struggling with. And it's such a source of energy for me in terms of pretty much everything I do. This concept of life in the overlap, I'm always looking for it.
Yeah. I mean, this is what I think of as innovation. So much innovation comes from this, looking at a similar but different context that there are some relations to what you do, but also a lot of it is very different, and taking inspiration from how they do things and then trying that out in your context. That's where innovation generally comes from. The obvious place is nature. So much of our innovation comes from problems that nature has already solved over 4 billion years, basically. Taking that approach to look outside. The other thing that I love about that, I'm a big fan of outsider thinking. So the idea of, having a look at something and a think about something which isn't your area of absolute expertise, but you know enough about it to kind of get a bit about it, and you're able to come with fresher ideas, new perspectives, different ways of looking at things that somebody that's just been in the trenches focused on that thing will find it very hard to do. So you can get benefits from that as well, from that overlap, being an outsider looking in somewhere new and cherry picking. Wow, that could be useful here. Brilliant. I love it.
And seeing new ideas that come out. And sometimes when the two things don't overlap and one stops before something else starts, that's kind of that liminal space idea. It's kind of like a stretched overlap. That is a space that I've learned a lot from as well. When you have left one role or left one element of thinking and you haven't quite moved into the next one, there's a space of real uncertainty about who you are, who your identity is. And I've learned over the years that life in the overlap principle for me has also helped me navigate that liminal space and look for the creativity in that. The freedom by not being defined by a particular role allows you to release something new and fresh, some new insight about yourself, about your surroundings that you can take into your next role, but that you wouldn't have got unless you had to let go. So that's kind of an extended concept of life in the overlap, but it is, I'm constantly looking for inspiration in these spaces in between.
Yeah, I love that. Very nice. And so, Laura, what's your third and final life lesson that you'd like to share?
Well, actually, that was one that's hit me quite recently, going through my going back into academia, which I left when I was 21. And your listeners will have all worked out that I'm a few more years on from that now.
27, 28 now, I think, Laura.
Exactly,
That's why I'm staying there. I'm sticking at 27.
Exactly. But going back into academia, it was just a really interesting. I've got an amazing cohort of people who are on this study program with me, absolutely incredible. And I joined a cohort meeting, it wasn't even an academic one, and I suddenly felt that they all knew more than I did. They'd all done their masters or their MBAs, or and I hadn't got any academic qualification since my degree. Just had a lot of life academic qualifications, and I just felt like an outsider, and I felt really low. And I thought I've got to have a talking to myself. So I started to write. But here I am again. I'm an outsider again. And then as I realised as I was writing to myself, saying, actually, Laura, think of the number of times you've been an outsider. I've been an outsider. I was a young woman in a male-oriented business. I was an outsider because I'm a business person working in L&D. I was an outsider when I went to the CIP. I couldn't become a member of the CIPD because I was an outsider. I had to become an academic member and fellow of the CIPD. It's outside. And then I was thinking, and I've turned that every time to my advantage. So I'd say my third life lesson that I've only recently learned is the outsider advantage. Because when you're outside of the way the world is working, or an organisation, or you feel an outsider in an organisation, it means you can see things differently. And that you can visit other places. It's not that you bridge. I used to think I was a bridge between government and employers in the early stages of my research work, but actually I realised I'm not a bridge. I visit places. I'm a traveller on that ocean, and I visit from one place to another, one supplier to another, one organisation to another, sharing insights, sharing data, picking up exciting new tidbits of ideas that then feed the next part of my travel and my search for this. And there is an advantage to being an outsider, and now I look for that. I look for work that says, we want you to come in and be independent, Laura, because we need an outside perspective on it, because I realise that is my advantage. And it's not that I don't belong, it's because I belong being an outsider and visiting and sharing and helping the places that I visit kind of inspire new ideas. So the outsider advantage, I think, is definitely my third and most recently learnt life lesson that I hadn't realised I was learning until last year.
Yeah, fantastic. You know what, Laura, that's one of mine as well. The
Is
outsider. The outsider. It's I think there's such strength there, and there's such opportunity there, and I don't think anyone should ever feel sad or awkward that they're outside of something. It's, as you say, you've got a fresh perspective, you've got an opportunity to look at things differently, and you've got an opportunity to choose, do you want to be an insider? And quite often maybe you don't. I think there's huge opportunities there. That's a brilliant one. I'm really happy to hear that. Very good.
Share it. Hope someone's going to do 3 life lessons with you, Rob, at some point.
Maybe in season 2 or something like that. But it's going to be fascinating, talking to all of these greats of our industry and hearing what their lessons are and seeing where there's overlaps and seeing if there's any trends. So, that's going to be fascinating in itself. But I mean, Laura Overton, thank you so much for being here with me today as a 3 Life Lessons guest. You've been fantastic. Thank you. If you've enjoyed learning those 3 life lessons, then make sure that you like, subscribe and follow so that you never miss an episode.